Hello and thanks for joining us on World Now. We begin in Africa, where a nationwide curfew has been declared in Sierra Leone following massive protests in parts of the capital, Freetown, and other areas in the northern part of the country. 2 police officers were killed Wednesday when protests transcended into clashes between security forces and youths, demanding the resignation of the president as a result of biting economic hardship. Women who had gathered in the city center on Wednesday holding placards later fled to sea in the build-up of tension. Police say dozens of protesters were arrested and a health worker in Freetown says dozens of people were injured. In the east end of the Kisi neighborhood in the capital, demonstrators threw rocks and sticks at security forces who fired tear gas in return. Several protesters said security forces had also fired live bullets. Protesters were heard chanting Bio must go, referring to President Julius Maada Bio, who is currently in the United Kingdom on a private visit. Sierra Leone's Vice President Mohamed Jale Jallo, running the nation's affairs on his behalf, states the government stands on the protests.
These unscrupulous individuals have embarked on a violent and unauthorized protest which has led to the loss of lives of innocent Sierra Leoneans, including security personnel. It is also reported that public buildings, including police stations, have been attacked and burnt down in various parts of the country. Therefore, government wishes it to be known that as a country of law and order, these violations are unacceptable in all their forms. Consequently, government hereby declares a nationwide curfew.
In Africa, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the Rwandan capital, Kigali, for talks with President Paul Kagame on the tension with the DR Congo. He would also be having talks with the Rwandan Foreign Minister, Vincent Biruta. Mr. Blinken will visit the Rwandan Genocide Memorial Site, U.S. Embassy staff, and attend a civil society event before departing for the United States.
Contributions to the United Nations and regional peacekeeping missions.
Now let's go to the United States, where former U.S. President Donald Trump has declined to answer questions as part of a New York State investigation into his family's business practices. State officials accuse the Trump organization of misleading authorities about the value of its assets in order to get favorable loans and tax breaks. Mr. Trump denies wrongdoing and has called the civil probe a witch hunt. His disposition comes just days after the FBI executed an unprecedented search warrant at his Florida estate, Mar-a-Lago, as part of a separate investigation that is reportedly linked to his handling of classified material. While the Attorney General's investigation is a civil one, a parallel investigation is being carried out by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, which could result in criminal charges. Legal analysts suggest Mr. Trump may have declined to answer questions on Wednesday because his answers could have been used against him in that criminal investigation. Mr. Trump began by reading a statement into the record condemning the Attorney General and her investigation and invoking his Fifth Amendment rights. He proceeded to say same answer to every question he was asked. A global affairs analyst, Eji Kyopa, joins me now from Dallas, Texas, in the United States for more on the controversial investigation. Thank you so much for joining us on World Now. Monday's FBI raid on the home of former President Donald Trump, including a safe, has raised eyebrows and questions about what the search could indicate about the possible criminal investigation into the former president and those around him. What has been your reading of this development?
Well, thank you for having me on your show. The reading has been very mixed. Trump himself has been a Latin rod because, since he ran and won the first term, for the 4 years he was in office, everybody, Democrats somehow just wanted everything to be thrown at him and they impeached him twice. And since he left office, the same thing has continued. the issues about his business practices. Again, we have to separate that. It's not about Trump himself. It's about the organization. And just like people have said, they filed a bankruptcy. Trump never, filed a personal bankruptcy, but he's filed a bankruptcy on some of his businesses. So that distinction has to be made. As to, the recent raid at his house, by the FBI, there are mixed reactions, and then those reactions are always going to be on what side of the political aisle, one is. At the same time, Americans are beginning to, say what is going on, because I don't think in my 30-something years living in America, I have never seen an ex-president being persecuted and being treated and chased around in the way, Trump is being chased around. He's not an ordinary citizen, not somebody that can hide anywhere. So if there are some documents that are in his home, I think, they should have gone to court, get a judgment, and demand him to release those documents as opposed to a raid. When you raid somebody's house like that, it's just typical what they do to common criminals, not a former president. I don't think any court has convicted him to where anybody can call him a criminal. So we are watching, as Americans, some people are upset and pissed off. Some people are quiet about it because, again, if this happens to a former president, who knows? Are we setting a precedent that he can go on to another president? I hope not. But, this is just a shock to the nation and to the world.
Well, you sounded like this is more like politically motivated, but then we don't know yet what exactly the FBI recovered on the raid, and the DOJ has not commented about the raid or investigation. So what possible crimes would be under investigation here?
Well, when he left office, there was this allegation that he took some documents, that are classified. And so the FBI, when a president is leaving office, all the presidential papers are secured, and they're often taken into a secured warehouse until they build their presidential library. And then that document is now, the National Archive will take care of it, secure it until it's put in the presidential library. And some of it is classified such that the only way you can read it if you get access. Someone just made public. So that is what this is about. They say 10 or 15 boxes is what he took, but nobody knows what are in those boxes. I don't know how much of American presidential thing you know, but when Clinton left office, there was accusation that, Mrs. Clinton, took some plates, China from the White House. It took a year or so before they were able to turn it over and send it back, because there are strict rules to what is a personal asset of a president and what's public. So we don't know what the FBI turned up with. Nobody has said what are in those boxes. Maybe they go to court and try to find out what are in the boxes, whether the FBI were successful in getting the information or the documents they were looking for. So again, it just happened, but the reaction has been very fierce. And, a lot of people, again, depending on what side you are, whether you're happy because, it's about Trump, or whether you are dismayed.
Right. Very quickly, Mr. Harper. Politically speaking, the raid comes as the January 6th hearings have already caused some damage to the former president's reputation. And Mr. Trump is not simply a former president. He's considering another run for the office in 2024. So could these investigations stop him from running?
Again, until he's convicted. Remember, politics is never about the angels in them. It's about the angles. So until he's convicted, until there's an indictment, or, so whether he's going to run or not run, it's all entirely up to him to make that determination. January 6th is looking for information in order to either bring charges or to, some people having pride out of that effort, but nothing has so far been done on Trump. Again, he's the big fish. He's the big fish, and he's a very big fish globally and internationally. So there are going to be people who are interested to see him fall. I mean, the fear is that if he declares to run again, and it'll be hard for any Democrat to beat him. I don't know whether that's their strategy to discredit him, so that he wouldn't be able to do it. We don't know. And then
Right.
November is our general election, and then
Right.
we'll find out whether the Democrats are still controlling the houses, or is it going to be a flip.
Right, quite understandable. We understand that Mr. Trump is a key member of your party, the Republican. But all the same, we'll see how the whole thing, pans out. The whole thing pan out at the end of the day. From Dallas, global affairs analyst A.G. Kelpa. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Now, staying with developments in the United States, an Iranian man has been charged by the United States over allegations of plotting to kill the national security advisor of former President Trump, John Bolton. U.S. officials says Shahram Poursafi, a member of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, is in Iran and is wanted over the alleged plot. The officials say Mr. Poursafi was likely seeking revenge for the U.S. strike that killed Iran's most powerful military commander, who spearheaded Iranian military operations in the Middle East. The 62-year-old headed the Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. He was killed at Baghdad airport in Iraq in January 2020 in a strike ordered by President Donald Trump. An Iranian government spokesperson told state media that the allegations were baseless, but the U.S. classifies the Quds force as terrorists and holds them responsible for the deaths of hundreds of U.S. personnel. Still in the United States, a city council in Alabama has voted to dissolve its police department after the assistant chief sent a racist text message to other officers. That's according to the Vincent City's mayor, James Latimer. During an emergency meeting of the city council, members moved to suspend with pay the chief of police and assistant chief. The third officer resigned later that evening after the council voted to pursue fully the dissolution of the police department. The decision has left the city's nearly 2,000 residents with no active police officers. Angry residents had called for the assistant police chief to be fired at a city council meeting on August the 2nd after the text message, which included a racist joke about slavery, surfaced on social media. Now to our coverage of the war between Russia and Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky says the war began with Crimea will end with the repossession of Crimea. He was speaking hours after a string of explosions hit a Russian airbase in Crimea, killing one person. President Zelensky did not mention the blast, but he devoted his nightly address to the Crimea Peninsula, insisting that Russia has turned what used to be one of the best places in Europe into one of the most dangerous places in Europe. There is more in this report.
At least 7 Russian warplanes were destroyed after explosions rocked annexed Crimea on Tuesday. New satellite images show it could be Moscow's biggest loss of military aircraft in a single day since World War II. On Wednesday, the Ukrainian armed forces added 9 aircraft to the tally of Russian military hardware they say has been destroyed since the Russian invasion of Ukraine began in February. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense said it could not determine the cause of the explosions at the air base. But the Russian Ministry of Defense argued the blasts were caused by aviation ammunition, but did not say how it had been detonated. In his nightly address, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukraine is a multinational state with various national communities living on the land for centuries. According to him, Ukraine is a native to people whose national cultures and aspirations were formed in Crimea. Therefore, when Ukrainians are working for the liberation of the peninsula, they are fighting for the restoration of the territorial integrity of their state and for the return of the indigenous people of Ukraine. According to a statement from the Crimea Health Ministry, the explosions killed at least 1 person and injured at least 9. Ukraine has not claimed responsibility, but this new evidence suggests the possibility of a targeted attack. On the 24th of February this year, 8 years after the Crimea annexation, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, using Crimea as a springboard to move Russian troops deeper inside Ukraine. Right now, the International Donation Conference #Copenhagen Ukraine has begun in Christiansborg, Copenhagen. 26 countries will participate in the conference, which aims to strengthen the cooperation between Ukraine and a number of Nordic and Eastern European countries and other Central allies and partners. As the war between Russia and Ukraine continues in its 24th week, the feuding sides appear stuck in a military deadlock. Ukraine's counter-offensive in the southern Kherson region has not made any territorial advances, and Russia's offensive in the eastern Donetsk region seems to have slowed down to a halt, despite daily shellings, bombings, and attempts at attacks along the entire front.
Global affairs analyst Kunle Fallow joins me from the United States of Minneapolis for more on the lingering war. Thank you so much for joining us on World Now. Leighton said the satellite images point to a deliberate attack rather than an accident due to the presence of 3 large craters. So what's your reading of this? Could it be an attack or a mere accident?
Thanks for having me. So the recent, we would call it an attack on the Russian region, well, Crimea region, annexed by Russia, is more like a pointer to the fact that the war is still ongoing, and we're not seeing the end of it yet. It is an offensive from the Ukrainian side, and although the Russians are not fully acknowledging that the Ukrainians did it, but the tactic about that is it would reduce the morale or the level of morale on the side of the Russians if there is a public acknowledgement that the Ukrainians are, bombing or sending bombs towards that area. There needs to be a front to show that they're winning, or they seem to be winning the war, and Ukrainians, the military in Ukraine cannot overcome them or defeat them. Hence, they wouldn't concede to any form of attack or any forms of the fact that some of their military equipment and war machines were attacked during the bombings.
Well, if you could recall, Mr. Zelensky's latest remarks suggest he believes that Ukraine must retake the peninsula before the war can end. With this insistence, do you see this war ending anytime soon?
Well, it's a little complicated. The reason I'm saying that is because in some parts of Ukraine, although it's been about 6 months in the ongoing invasion of Ukraine by the Russian, there seems to be some normalcy returning to some parts of Ukraine. Let's take, for instance, there was just a deal that was brokered by the United Nations and Turkey between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine is known for their agricultural produce. They are a big exporter of agricultural produce like wheat and maize and all kinds of stuff. So now there is a deal that was brokered not too long ago. Now Ukraine will be able to export their wheat from their country to other parts of Europe, and the Russians are saying they're asking them to go ahead with it. And however, there's also another interesting development from Ukraine, a popular convenience place where people tend to buy food. I don't want to mention the name for publicity's sake. They seem to be coming back to Ukraine, and they're promising that they will start operating there, meaning that people can come out and buy food and eat and whatnot. So yes, there seems some form of normalcy, but that's not to say the war is over.
Well, very quickly, Russia sounded a warning last month when ex-President Dmitry Medvedev threatened last month that Any attack on Crimea by Ukraine would be considered deeply serious by Moscow. And he also added that Judgment Day will instantly await. How serious do you think this warning is?
War rhetoric would not do anything than what he has already done. Both sides has been countless loss of lives and property. Thousands and millions of properties and lives have been destroyed because of this invasion, and there is no rhetoric that could have done more harm than what has already been done. So on both sides, these are war terms, and it will continue until the war will be officially over. So we will continue to see rhetoric of this nature.
Well, we'll see how things continue to pan out at the end of the day. A global affairs analyst, Kunle Falowo, thank you so much.
A pleasure.
That's talking about the climate change hazard. Well, let's look at the Chinese issue, where the Chinese ambassador to Moscow says the United States is the main instigator of the war in Ukraine, and he has accused Washington of seeking to crush Russia. Ambassador Xiang Zhui says the U.S. backed Russia into a corner with repeated expansions of the NATO defense alliance and sustained support for forces in a bid to align with Ukraine with the European Union rather than Russia. He also insists that Washington, while imposing unprecedented comprehensive sanctions on Russia, continues to supply arms and military equipment to Ukraine. Ambassador Zhang maintains the ultimate goal of the United States is to exhaust and crush Russia with a protracted war and tough sanctions.